The General Hospital update for Tuesday, September 9th, reveals that Alexis Davis will make a critical mistake while Josslyn, Jax, and Vaughn escape. Jacinda will also experience a financial setback, so there will be a lot of action on the ABC serial. When Vaughn and Josslyn are finally free, they will go into action at the Five Poppies Resort. That's fantastic news, since Jason Morgan could use some assistance defeating the guard he's been brawling with. Once that guard is gone, Josslyn and Vaughn will be alone as Jason races back to the lab. Vaughn will press Josslyn to continue without him if he does not make it, but she will trust that they will both make it to safety. Jason pledged to come through for Britt Westbourne. Jason vows to uphold his word, even if it means risking his own life. Pascal allegedly convinced the mysterious boss that Britt is more trouble than she is worth. Britt now has a 1-hour countdown to her death if that explosive goes off, so Jason will return to assist her. Removing Britt's ankle monitor could blow them both up, but that's a risk they'll have to accept. Jason will be close by Britt's side as they strive to get out of this scary situation. Fortunately, GH spoilers reveal that Britt, Jason, Josslyn, and Vaughn will all survive their trauma at the Five Poppies Resort. It appears that there may be some explosion drama, but it is comforting to know that all 4 of them will return home safely. Meanwhile, Jack Brennan will corner Lulu Spencer and persuade her to allow Valentine Cassadine to meet with Charlotte Cassadine in person. Lulu will undoubtedly object, but Brennan will insist that the Steinmauer visit take place. Brennan needs to know who runs Caesar Faison's former organization, so he'll alert Lulu about the dangers of his arrangement with Valentine. While Brennan gives Lulu a veiled threat to think about, Michael Corinthos will pay Curtis Ashford a visit. Michael will ask Curtis to tell him where Jacinda is so that he can use her as an alibi. Across town, Jacinda will inform Portia Robinson and Nina Reeves that she has arrived to collect, but Portia will turn the tables and maybe blackmail her as well. Portia may claim that if Jacinda tells anybody about their Drew Kane drugging plot, she will face the same consequences. Jacinda does not have the leverage she believes she does, thus she will face a setback when it comes to earning more money. That might lead to Michael bribing Jacinda to claim they were together when Drew was shot. However, Jacinda may reach a different agreement with Nina, who may get an intriguing proposition by midweek. Because Jacinda could wind up with the ability to save or sink Michael, she may be willing to make him appear guilty if Nina pays her more. Regardless, Jacinda will continue to play a significant role in the upcoming episodes. At the police station, Alexis will go to Anna Devane's office and agree to a grilling. Although Alexis will appear cooperative, she will make a risky mistake that may lead Anna to suspect her of attempting to kill Drew. Drew will appear sleepy in the hospital as he answers the next questions. Will Drew reveal the truth about his last memories before losing consciousness, or will he mislead the cops? According to General Hospital teasers, Drew's mystery plotline will be filled with more twists and turns, so stay tuned for updates on all the surprises. CDL will have more exciting General Hospital spoilers, updates, and news to share, so make us your go-to GH source. According to General Hospital previews for Tuesday, September 9th, Drew Kane will explain the last thing he recalls, while Michael Corinthos receives assistance in his quest for Jacinda. Jason Morgan will also save Britt Westbourne, so here's what you should expect. Drew will be questioned about the awful incident he just went through after he awakens at GH. Drew will reveal the last thing he remembers before everything went dark, so we'll see whether he says anything that could point the finger at anyone. At the PCPD, Alexis Davis will emphasize that she is willing to answer any questions Anna Devane may have. However, Alexis will go overboard with what she spills, making Anna even more suspicious. Next, Michael will meet with Curtis Ashford and ask for his assistance in identifying Jacinda, the escort for whom Michael purchased a drink the night Drew was shot. Michael wants to use Jacinda as an alibi, but he needs to find her first. Of course, Jacinda will be hounding Portia Robinson and Nina Reeves for more money, but Portia may discover a method to gain an advantage. As for Jack Brennan, it appears that he will approach Lulu Spencer and request her permission to allow Charlotte Cassadine to meet Valentine Cassadine in person at Steinmauer. That is what Valentine demands, therefore Brennan must give if he wants to know who is operating Caesar Faison's former business. Brennan appears to be threatening Lulu in order to get her to cooperate, but he will ultimately label it a warning. With the knife next to him at the Five Poppies Resort, Vaughn should be able to cut off his bindings as well as Josslyn Jax. Josslyn and Vaughn will assist Jason now that a guard has him in a chokehold. With the final guard down, Jason may return to the lab and save Britt as the explosive countdown begins. Jason will guarantee Britt that either they will or will not get out of this, so they will genuinely be in this together. Vaughn will encourage Josslyn to keep going if he falls. Vaughn will already be bracing himself for a bad fate, but he and Josslyn will thankfully survive this ordeal. The same is true for Britt and Jason, therefore they will all escape any upcoming explosive pandemonium. General Hospital spoilers indicate that Britt will return to Port Charles in the near future, so stay tuned for updates on how this surprising news will affect the entire community. CDL is the place to go for the latest General Hospital spoilers, news, and updates, so make us your favorite GH destination. Josslyn Carter and Vaughn Ramsey made their move when the sun had just crossed the horizon, putting a subtle golden tint over the tranquil village of Willow Creek. The air was crisp, with the aroma of dew-soaked grass and the faint buzz of early morning traffic. For weeks, the two had been preparing their escape, whispering in the shadows of the old mill where they would meet after dusk. Josslyn, with her sharp wit and unwavering tenacity, was always the mastermind. Vaughn, quieter but passionately devoted, blindly followed her lead. They'd been stuck in the small town for far too long, suffocated by its oppressive rituals, judgmental eyes, and the weight of expectations that neither could match. Today was their day to be free, leaving behind the past and those who thought they knew them. The plan was basic yet audacious. Josslyn had spent evenings memorizing the schedules for the town's only bus depot, a dilapidated station on the outskirts of Willow Creek where greyhounds blasted in and out twice a day. 6:15 a.m. The bus to Chicago was their ticket out. They had saved every money they could, Josslyn from her diner shifts and Vaughn from odd jobs at the auto shop. Their backpacks, draped over their shoulders as they snuck through the pre-dawn streets, contained only the necessities, a change of clothes, a few granola bars, a damaged paperback Josslyn couldn't throw away, and the $800 they'd scraped together. The town remained silent, interrupted only by the occasional bark of a dog or the creak of a porch swing in the breeze. They proceeded rapidly, staying in the alleys and avoiding the main highways where someone may recognize them. Josslyn's pulse pumped, not from fear, but from the excitement of what lied ahead, a new life, a fresh start. Meanwhile, across town, Jacinda Monroe awoke to a very different morning. The piercing ring of her phone shocked her out of a restless slumber, her dreams still entwined with the stress of the previous week. Jacinda, the town's youngest councilwoman, had established her reputation on being in control. Every meeting was meticulously organized, every speech was faultless. But last night's town hall meeting was a fiasco. She'd worked hard to build a new community center, believing it would revitalize Willow Creek's dwindling spirit. Residents, on the other hand, saw it as a waste of money, a vanity project for a lady who, despite 3 years in power, remained an outsider. Their boos still resonated in her ears, and their allegations of mismanagement wounded harder than she'd admit. She had worked months organizing support, securing funding, and navigating the council's bureaucracy, only to see it all crumble in one evening. Jacinda sat up in bed and rubbed her temples as the phone rang again. Clara, her assistant, delivered news that made her stomach plummet. The contractor for the community center had walked out, citing unforeseen complications. Jacinda understood what that meant. The council's opposition had gotten to him, casting doubt on her leadership and the project's sustainability. She had trusted that contractor and spent hours negotiating arrangements, and now this setback threatened to wreck not only the project but her entire career. She could already hear the whispering at the next council meeting. Jacinda is too young, ambitious, and out of touch. She dangled her legs over the side of the bed, her thoughts racing. There had to be some way to salvage this. She'd worked her way up to this position, overcoming critics who believed a 29-year-old couldn't do the job. She refused to let one horrible night define her. Back at the bus depot, Josslyn and Vaughn hid behind a trash, watching the 6:15 bus arrive with a hiss of brakes. The driver, a grizzled man carrying a thermos of coffee, got out to stretch his legs. This was their moment. Josslyn gave Vaughn a quick nod, and they dashed across the parking lot, sneaking onto the bus while the driver was distracted. They took seats at the back, stooping low to escape attention. Josslyn's pulse raced as she grabbed the armrest, her gaze fixated on the depot entrance. Someone may spot them at any time, her father, who had grounded her for sneaking out last week, or Vaughn's older brother, who had been keeping an eye on their plans for days. But the seconds passed, and no one came. The driver climbed back on board, the doors hissed shut, and the bus lurched onward. Josslyn released a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. They were doing it. They were leaving. The road stretched out before them, a ribbon of asphalt that sliced across fields of corn and soybeans. Vaughn leaned against the window, his dark hair falling across his eyes. He was quieter than usual, and Josslyn worried if he was having second thoughts. She reached over and squeezed his hand. "We're gonna be okay," she said quietly, more to herself than to him. Vaughn offered her a slight smile, indicating that he trusted her even when he wasn't sure. They'd been talking about Chicago for months, its tall buildings, its limitless potential. Josslyn aspired to go art school and paint murals that communicated things no one in Willow Creek could understand. Vaughn only wanted a career, a place to belong that did not include his family's burden. They would make it work together. They had to. Back in Willow Creek, Alexis Harper was struggling with a personal problem. As the town's librarian and unofficial secret keeper, Alexis took pride in her discretion. She knew who borrowed which books, who lingered too long in the romance section, and who was studying topics they didn't want anybody to know about. But she made a mistake yesterday. A large one. During a heated argument with her friend Marla at the cafe, Alexis had let slip a detail about a famous resident's library records, something she'd pledged to keep discreet. It was a casual moment, the result of impatience and too much coffee, but Marla's eyes were filled with gossip-hungry joy. By the evening, the word had spread like wildfire. Councilman Bradley's late-night investigation into offshore bank accounts was suddenly the talk of Willow Creek. Alexis spent the morning at the library, shaking while she sorted returns. She had always been cautious, even methodical, but this mistake may cost her everything. The library was her safe haven, the only place where she felt in control. If the town lost trust in her, she'd lose more than just her job, she'd lose her sense of purpose. She attempted to concentrate on the stack of books in front of her, but her mind was replaying the talk with Marla. Why had she mentioned anything? She knew Marla couldn't keep a secret to save her life. Alexis looked at the clock, 9:07 a.m. She needed to fix it before Bradley found out. She grabbed her phone and sent a fast text to Marla, urging her to remain silent. But deep down, Alexis knew it was too late. The damage was done. As the bus approached Chicago, Josslyn and Vaughn began to relax. The pastures outside gave place to suburbs, which led to the city's expansive outskirts. Josslyn took out her sketchbook and drew thoughts for the life they would create. Vaughn observed her, his previous doubts dissipating. They didn't have much, but they had each other, which felt sufficient. Josslyn's sketches were wild and bright, with colors Willow Creek had never seen. She mentioned finding an inexpensive apartment, possibly near the lake, where they could hear the waves at night. Vaughn nodded, adding practical elements like a job at a garage and a budget to help them stretch their money. For the first time in years, they felt liberated, as if the world had finally opened up. In Willow Creek, Jacinda was already in damage control mode. She had convened an emergency meeting with her council members, aiming to portray the contractor's departure as a small hitch. She stood at the head of the table, her voice unwavering despite the knot in her chest. "We'll find another contractor," she added, looking across the room for support. "This project is too important to let die." Some nodded, but others exchanged doubtful looks. Jacinda realized she was on thin ice. The community center was more than simply a structure. It represented her vision for a better Willow Creek, a place where children like Josslyn and Vaughn might find something worth remaining for. If only she had realized they were already gone. Alexis, meantime, was writing an apology letter to Councilman Bradley. She pledged to improve library protocols so that nothing like this would happen again. But as she pressed send, her stomach churned. Bradley was not known for forgiveness, nor was the community known for forgetting. Alexis reclined back in her chair, peering up at the library's lofty ceilings. She'd always thought of herself as cautious, but one moment of weakness shattered years of trust. She wondered if Josslyn and Vaughn, two of her favorite customers, would ever notice the mess she had made. They'd always come to the library to get away, their heads bowed over books and whispering plans in the corner. Now that they'd left, Alexis couldn't help but feel that she'd failed them as well. The bus arrived at Chicago's Union Station soon after noon. Josslyn and Vaughn jumped off, their eyes wide with the city's chaos, horns blaring, people rushing, skyscrapers rising. It was the antithesis of Willow Creek. Josslyn took Vaughn's hand and pulled him toward the exit. "This is it," she murmured, her voice full with possibility. They had no idea where they would sleep tonight or how they would spend their $800, but that didn't matter just now. They were here together, and it was up to them to define the future. Jacinda's meeting ran on, and the council's disagreements became heated. She battled to retain her cool, devising a new strategy to get financing and a new contractor. But the disappointments were stacking up, and her confidence was fading. She remembered Josslyn, who had previously volunteered for one of her community outreach initiatives. The girl had been full of fire and refused to let the town define her. Jacinda envied him now, wishing she could borrow some of his defiance to face the council's scrutiny. Alexis closed the library early, which she had not done in years. She walked home, her steps tinged with regret. The town would speak, and she would have to deal with it. But when she passed the bus depot, she noticed something odd, a discarded ticket stub for Chicago on the ground. She grabbed it, her heart falling. She didn't know for sure, but she suspected it belonged to Josslyn and Vaughn. They'd escaped, just as they'd always imagined. Alexis smiled softly, despite everything. At least one person in Willow Creek had gotten away. The city devoured Josslyn and Vaughn, its noise and activity engulfing them like a promise. They chose a cheap diner near the station and shared a platter of fries while plotting their next move. Josslyn scribbled on a napkin, her pencil sketching the outline of a mural she planned to create one day. Vaughn observed her, his quiet strength grounding them both. They had no idea what tomorrow would hold, but they would face it together, away from the small-town shadows they'd left behind. Jacinda returned to her office and glanced at the designs for the community center that were scattered across her desk. She wouldn't give up just yet. She'd figure out how to make things work and demonstrate her leadership abilities. Maybe she'd lost this round, but she'd learned something. Willow Creek was more than simply a place to be saved, it was a place to fight for, even when it fought back. Alexis, sitting on her veranda that evening, watched the stars appear above Willow Creek. She had made a mistake, but she would overcome it. The library would open tomorrow, and she'd continue, one book at a time. She imagined Josslyn and Vaughn out there in the world, hoping they would find what they were seeking for. The village seemed empty without them, but their escape gave her a weird sense of hope. Perhaps, in time, she'll find her own way forward. The days passed, and Willow Creek resumed its normal rhythm. Josslyn and Vaughn were fading memories, with their names appearing less frequently as the town's chatter shifted to newer controversies. Jacinda pushed forward, her determination growing with each hurdle. Alexis gradually rebuilt her reputation via subtle acts of kindness. And somewhere in Chicago, two young dreamers were forging a new life, their story only beginning. Drew sat in the dimly lit hospital room, staring at the blank wall in front of him, his mind caught between the present and the shards of a history he couldn't quite grasp. The only sound that kept him grounded was the continuous beeping of his cardiac monitor. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw flashes, images that didn't make sense, fragments of conversations he couldn't identify, and faces that felt both familiar and distant. He tried to concentrate, to get back into the experience, but one thing kept bothering him, the last thing he remembered before waking up here. The situation was chaotic. Shouting voices. Water splashes. His skull ached with pain. Someone was calling his name, Michael, or Jason, but everything else was muffled, as if he were stuck underwater. Then a brilliant flash and nothing. Michael stood outside the room, resting against the cold, sterile wall and ran his hands through his hair, frustrated. He'd gone to every specialist, asked for every favor, and urged every doctor to discover out why Drew's memories remained fragmented. This wasn't just about Drew, it was about what he knew, what he may be concealing, and what secrets were buried deep in those lost hours. Jason approached silently, his normal placid demeanor revealing little, but Michael noticed a spark of alarm in his eyes. "Any changes?" Jason asked gently. Michael shakes his head. "Nothing. He can't recall anything after the docs. It's as if someone flipped a switch and wiped everything clean." Jason folded his arms, his face hard. Or someone made sure he wouldn't remember. The words weighed thick between them. Michael had thought the same thing, but hearing Jason say it aloud made it seem more true. If Drew's memory loss was not an accident, someone had engineered it, and they were still out there. Drew grasped the blanket's edge as visions began to come back, a boat, black waters, voices arguing, and a gleam of metal in someone's palm. He gasped as the recollection hit, but it rapidly faded, leaving him with more questions than answers. He pushed his palms to his temples, wishing the pictures to remain. Michael entered the room discreetly, pulling up a chair next to him. "Hey, man," he murmured softly, attempting to maintain his composure despite his tiredness. "That's okay. We'll work this out." Drew stared at him, confused, and said, "You are not alone in this." "Michael, I keep seeing things. Bits and bits, but they do not make sense. Somebody was there." Michael moved forward and tightened his grip on the armrest, unable to see someone's face. "We will figure out who it was. Whatever happened that night, we'll bring it all together." Jason strode inside, silent but dominating, his presence filling the room. "Drew," he replied quietly and steadily, "don't force it. The more you attempt to recall, the tougher it will be. Let it come on its own." Drew wanted to fight, to scream that he didn't have time, but Jason's expression stopped him. Drew was aware that Jason was withholding information. Hours later, while Michael and Jason were reviewing leads in the corridor, Drew's palm jerked as another memory appeared, this one more vivid than the last. "Britt." Her voice called his name. Her face showed a glimpse of terror. The sound of gunfire. Then Jason's voice rang out above the commotion. Jason received a call from his tech-savvy pal Spinelli as he stood up in bed and whispered her name, "Britt." "We've got a problem," Spinelli remarked hurriedly. "The folks who came after Drew aren't done. They've also been tracking Britt." Jason tightened his grasp on the phone. "Where is she?" "She arrived at the clinic an hour ago but left." Jason quickly grabbed his jacket and made his way to the door, determined. Michael followed, unwilling to be left behind. They knew Britt was in danger, and if Drew's fractured memories were correct, she was involved in whatever happened the night he blacked out. Meanwhile, Britt was on the opposite side of town, sitting alone in her car in a dimly lighted parking lot. She believed she was safe, but her instinct told her otherwise. Every shadow appeared to be ominous, and every sound was exaggerated in the silence. She reached for her phone, planning to call Jason, but before she could dial, headlights illuminated the lot and a black SUV came to a halt behind her. Her heart beat as masked men stepped out with weapons drawn. She scrambled for the door handle, but they moved too quickly. One of them wrenched open her door and dragged her out onto the pavement. Then came the sound of a motorcycle. Jason. He arrived like a storm, rushing off the bike before it even came to a halt, rifle raised, and precision in every stride. The attackers turned their weapons on him, but Jason was quicker, disarming one, knocking another to the ground, and pushing Britt behind him. Michael, directly behind him, grabbed a metal bar from the ground and swung with all his strength, knocking the final man back. "Go!" Jason said, seizing Britt's hand and yanking her to his bike. "Now!" They sped out into the night, their engines roaring and tires screeching behind them. Britt clung to Jason, her breath weak against his back, but for the first time all night, she felt safe. Drew sat straight in the hospital, clutching his head as another wave of memories washed over him. This one was clear and excruciatingly sharp: the gunfight, the icy spray of water, Jason crying his name, and then, betrayal. Someone he trusted had been present. Someone who knows everything. When Jason arrived with Britt, safe but shaken, Drew's first words were raspy but firm: "I remember now. Not everything, but sufficient. We aren't dealing with random goons. This was planned. Someone in Port Charles wanted me, and Britt, out of the way." Michael's jaw tightened. "Who?" Drew's gaze fixed on Jason's. "It's someone close. Someone we all trusted." The audience became silent, the weight of his words hanging in the air. Whatever mysteries were hidden in Drew's lost memories were beginning to surface, and they were far worse than anyone had anticipated. Jason realized they were running out of time. Whoever was behind this wasn't done, and now everyone they cared about was in risk. Michael returned his gaze to Drew after a brief peek at Britt, who remained pale and shaking. "We'll protect you," he stated confidently. "Each of us. But we need the complete truth." Drew agreed, his grip stiffening. "Then we return to where we started. The docks. That's where we'll find the answers," Jason said without hesitation. "Then that's where we're going." The three of them exited the hospital together, entering into the muggy Port Charles night, where danger lurked around every corner. The person who had attempted to ruin them was watching and waiting, knowing that their next move could change everything. But Jason had already taken a quiet promise. Whatever it took, he would protect Britt, Drew, and Michael, ensuring that they all received the answers they deserved. It wasn't just about remembering anymore. It was about surviving. And at Port Charles, survival was always costly. Drew's last memory remained vivid. The boat. The gunfire. The treachery. And a single, frightening reality settled in his gut: the person behind it all was no stranger. It was someone they never expected. Whoever it was, they were only started. The night air at Port Charles felt thick, carrying the tension of secrets that refused to remain hidden. Drew, Jason, Michael, and Britt gathered at the Corinthos safe house, where the flicker of a solitary lamp produced lengthy shadows over the room. Everyone's nerves were raw, and stillness fell over them until Jason spoke. "We need to assume whoever's behind this is watching us," he added, pacing back and forth, his hands clenched at his sides. Drew's memory loss was not accidental. This was deliberate, precise, and linked to something larger. Britt curled up on the edge of the couch, arms securely wrapped about herself. Her voice quivered as she finally spoke. "I was followed for several days. I assumed it was nothing, but tonight, it wasn't random. They knew where I would be. Michael shared a troubled look with Jason. So, someone is tracking us, and Drew's blackout was not caused by the explosion on the docks. Drew raised his head, his jaw taut and eyes gleaming with purpose, implying that those present did not want him to remember. I saw someone, he murmured softly but steadily. During the chaos, just before everything went dark. I'm not sure who it was, but I do know one thing, it wasn't an adversary. It was someone close by. Someone who was meant to have my back. The remarks sparked unease around the crowd. Jason paused pacing, his visage enigmatic but his shoulders stiff. If someone we trust put this up, we can't just accuse everyone. We need proof. Michael leaned forward, elbows resting on his knees, irritation visible on his face. So, where do we start? The docks are our only lead, but if they expect us to return there, we may be stepping into a trap. Jason did not hesitate. That is exactly why we are going back. They want us scared and unsure, but we're not giving them that advantage. Britt shook her head, her voice shaking slightly. If they attempted to kill me before, they will try again. And if Drew remembers something that points to them, they won't stop until he's out of the way forever. Drew turned to her, his tone hard but gentle. Then we remain one step ahead. They came after you because you know something, too, possibly something you don't even understand. Jason's phone buzzed on the table, drawing everyone's attention. It was Spinelli again. Jason responded immediately, his voice clipped. Talk to me. Bad news, stone cold, Spinelli continued, his voice tense and urgent. I traced the SUV that pursued Britt tonight. The plates were phony, but I investigated further, and who funded this operation? It's connected to someone in Port Charles. Someone with deep pockets. Jason tightened his grasp on the phone. Who? Spinelli hesitated and then lowered his voice. I can't confirm just yet, but all signs point to someone inside the Quartermain circle. Michael's head snapped up, his stomach dropped. The implication was clear, this wasn't just about Drew's lost memories anymore. It was about family. Jason finished the conversation and looked at the others, his mouth tight. We have to move quickly. Drew drew a deep breath, his mind racing with bits of images and voices, like parts of a puzzle that wouldn't fit together. But one thing was certain, whomever planned this wasn't only after him or Britt. They were seeking dominance, power, and vengeance. And this time, nobody in Port Charles was safe.